The invitation came as a text message, not even a real invitation, just a group chat notification at 11:30 on a Tuesday night when my daughter was finally asleep and I was eating leftover rice at the kitchen counter. My brother had added me to a thread titled Dad's 60th The Reunion, and before I could even feel anything warm about being included, I scrolled down and saw the pinned message at the top. It was from my sister-in-law, Courtney. Quick note for everyone. This is a formal dinner at the Whitmore. Dress code is black tie. If you're not sure what that means, Google it. We want Dad's night to look a certain way, and we're asking everyone to come prepared. No exceptions. That was fine. I understood black tie. What came next was not fine. 30 seconds later, my phone buzzed with a private message from my brother. Not a call. A message. Hey, so Courtney and I were talking. Nate's family is going to be there. You know his dad is the alderman for the North Side District, right? It's kind of a big deal for Dad to have that connection at the table. We just think it might be less complicated if you sat this one out. You've got so much going on with Lily and everything. We don't want you to feel out of place. Dad will understand. I read it twice, then a third time. I want you to sit with that for a second. The way the cruelest things always come dressed in concern. You've got so much going on. We don't want you to feel out of place. What he meant was, you are a single mother who works a job we don't understand. You drive a 5-year-old Honda, and an alderman's family will be at this table. We cannot have you there. My father was turning 60, and my brother was uninviting me because my life didn't fit the photo they were staging. Have you ever been edited out of your own family? Not by accident, deliberately, like someone cropping a blurry image. Tell me your story in the comments. I really want to know who else has been there and where you're watching from tonight. I set my phone face down on the counter and looked at my daughter's crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator. Lily was 4. She drew horses that looked like tables with ears, and she signed every single one with a backwards L. I had 7 of them on that fridge. I looked at them for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called my colleague. His name is Dr. Toad, James Okafor, and he is the chief of cardiothoracic surgery at Mercy General. We have worked together for 3 years. He is one of maybe 4 people on the planet who knows everything about me, not just the resume line items, but the whole picture. The reason I mention him now is that when I called him at midnight on a Tuesday and said, "I need a favor," he didn't ask why. He just said, "Name it." I told him what I needed. There was a pause, and then he laughed, not unkindly. "Oh, this is going to be interesting," he said. "I'll make some calls." I hung up and finished my rice. I didn't feel angry. Anger is loud, and I've never had the luxury of loud. What I felt was something closer to clarity. The same cold, precise focus I get when I'm 3 hours into a complex procedure and I need my hands to be completely still. Here's what my family knows about me. I dropped out of my pre-med program when I got pregnant at 23. I raised Lily mostly alone after her father decided distance was easier than responsibility. I work in healthcare. That's all I've ever told them, because that's all they've ever actually asked. My mother, before she passed, used to tell people I was still finding my way. My father used to say it was a shame because I had such good grades. My brother Colin had simply updated his mental file on me at some point and stopped revising. Here is what they don't know. I did finish my degree. At night, online, while Lily slept in a pack-and-play in the corner of my studio apartment. I completed my residency at 30. I am now a board-certified cardiothoracic surgeon, one of the youngest in the state of Illinois. Last year, I performed the first successful robotic-assisted mitral valve repair at Mercy General. The hospital published a press release. It made the cover of the Illinois Medical Journal. My name was on the cover. My family doesn't subscribe to the Illinois Medical Journal. I drive the Honda to family dinners because the first time I showed up in something nicer, my sister-in-law spent the entire meal asking pointed questions about my financial situation with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was easier to disappear. I'm very good at disappearing. The Whitmore is on Michigan Avenue. It is the kind of place where the coat check attendant has a better suit than most wedding guests I've been to. I called their events coordinator the morning after I got Colin's message. I explained the situation and I made a reservation, not for my father's private dining room, but for the main floor. Table 12, which sits in the center of the room, visible from every entrance, and which the coordinator told me was typically reserved for hospital donors and city officials. I told her that Dr. James O'Coffer would be hosting. She said she'd make it work. Then I called my stylist. I don't have a stylist in the way people think. She's a friend who works in fashion and owes me one because I caught her valve prolapse during a routine checkup and got her into surgery before it became something catastrophic. She arrived at my apartment on Saturday afternoon with a garment bag over her arm and an expression that said she already knew exactly what this evening needed to accomplish. She pulled out a midnight blue gown. Long, clean lines, no embellishment except for a thin architectural strap at the shoulder. The kind of dress that doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. Perfect, I said. I know, she said. Lily watched the whole thing from the couch, eating apple slices, very solemn. When I came out of the bedroom, she looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "Mommy, you look like the lady on the puzzle." She meant a jigsaw puzzle we had of a painting. A woman in a blue coat standing in front of a winter skyline. I'll take it. My brother texted me twice that week, once to say, "Hope you understand, it's just complicated right now," and once to forward me a photo of the venue's menu. I don't know why he sent the menu. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe he genuinely thought I'd appreciate seeing what I was missing. I didn't respond to either message. Courtney, predictably, posted a reel of herself getting ready. The dress was beautiful. She tagged the designer. She wrote, "Night out for Dad's big 6060. Family first." I watched it once. Then I put my phone in my purse and went to get Lily from the babysitter's house. The evening of my father's birthday, I arrived at the Whitmore at 7 o'clock. James was already there with his wife, Adayasi, a woman so quietly formidable that she once told a hospital board chairman to sit down, and he did. Their presence at a dinner table changes the gravitational pull of a room. It just does. James stood when he saw me the way he always does, and Daisy hugged me and held my face in both her hands for a moment. "Ready?" James asked. "I've been ready for 3 years," I said. Table 12 was in the center of the main floor, exactly where I'd requested. From where we sat, I could see the corridor that led to the private dining rooms. Anyone moving between the lobby and the back of the restaurant would pass within 15 feet of us. I'd thought of that when I made the reservation. The dinner was good. The conversation was better. James was updating me on a clinical trial he was presenting at a conference in Boston, and Adaze was telling a story about a graduate student in her department who had submitted a thesis with the wrong name on the cover, his professor's name instead of his own, and no one caught it until the defense. We were laughing. We were genuinely laughing, the kind that sneaks up on you. That was when I saw them. My father came through the corridor first. He looked good. He'd gotten a new tuxedo, and his hair was combed back the way he wore it in old photos when he was young and still optimistic about things. Behind him came Courtney in her designer gown, one hand tucked into Colin's arm, the other managing the hem of her skirt. Then my brother, looking prosperous and slightly nervous in the way he always does when he's performing for an audience. And then Nate, Courtney's younger brother, the alderman's son, with a woman I didn't recognize on his arm. They were moving toward the back corridor. They would pass table 12. I didn't stand, I didn't call out. I simply picked up my wine glass and rested my elbow on the table and waited. My father saw me first. He stopped so abruptly that Courtney walked into his shoulder. The expression on his face. I've thought about it since. It wasn't quite any one thing. It was several things in rapid succession, like a slide carousel clicking through frames. Confusion. Recognition. Then something more complicated, almost structural, like watching a building realize it has been built on an assumption that turned out to be wrong. "Natalie," he said. "That's my name." He said it the way you say a word when you suddenly aren't sure you've been pronouncing it correctly. "Hi, Dad. Happy birthday." I kept my voice the way I keep my hands in surgery, Level, deliberate, no wasted movement. You look great. Colin's face had gone a strange color. Courtney was doing that thing where she smiles so the expression doesn't reach her eyes, which I have always found impressive in its own way. James stood. He extended his hand to my father with the specific kind of warmth that powerful people deploy when they want to be kind but also want the room to understand who they're being kind to. Dr. Okafor, it's good to meet you. Natalie has mentioned her family. Happy birthday, 60 is a remarkable milestone. My father shook his hand. Automatic, reflexive. Thank you. I didn't know. I wasn't aware Natalie knew you. Knew me? James smiled. The smile was genuinely warm and contained, just barely, a note of something else. Natalie is one of the most respected surgeons at Mercy General. We've operated together dozens of times. She's why our cardiac outcomes look the way they do. The silence that followed was the specific silence of a room recalibrating. Courtney recovered first. Her voice came out brighter than necessary, with that particular social hostess frequency. Oh, Natalie, we didn't know you were going to be here. What a coincidence. I looked at her. It's not a coincidence. I made a reservation. Nate had been standing back, slightly apart from the group. Now he stepped forward. I noticed him looking at me with an expression I didn't immediately recognize. He was around my age, sharper looking in person than in the campaign photos Courtney used to share. Wait, he said. Are you Natalie Crane? From Mercy General? Yes. He turned to look at his family, or maybe at Courtney specifically, with the specific bewilderment of someone who has just understood something he should have understood much earlier. My dad had his bypass at Mercy General 18 months ago. He almost didn't make it through the pre-op. The surgeon who cleared him said, they told him there was one person in that hospital who could handle the calcification on the left anterior, and that if she was on shift, it would be fine. He paused. That was you, wasn't it? It was not a question. Yes, I said. Your father is doing well. I followed up on his chart last spring. The recovery was textbook. Nate looked at Colin. Something passed between them that I wasn't meant to read, but I read it anyway. It was the look of two people realizing they have been operating on completely wrong information. My father sat down. Not at our table. There was no chair offered, and he didn't ask. But at a chair near the corridor entrance, the way people sit when their legs have made a decision their mind hasn't caught up to yet. He looked old in a way he hadn't looked when he walked in. I don't understand, he said, quietly, to no one in particular. You told us you were doing scheduling for the hospital. You asked me once what I did, I said. I said I worked in surgery scheduling. You didn't ask any follow-up questions. That was 4 years ago. Colin's jaw was doing something complicated. Natalie, you let us think. I let you think what you already thought, I said. There's a difference. I set my wine glass down. You texted me 8 days ago and told me not to come to Dad's birthday dinner because I might be out of place. Because you were worried about what Nate's family would think of me. I looked at Nate briefly and back at Colin. You didn't ask what I did for work. You didn't ask how Lily was. You just told me, very gently, that I was the wrong kind of family for the occasion. Courtney was very still. I have been the wrong kind of family for a long time, I continued, and I kept my voice quiet because quiet is more honest than volume. When I got pregnant, Dad said I was throwing my potential away. Mom cried about what she'd tell people. You offered to help me find an adoption agency, Colin, which I know you thought was kindness. But what it told me was that my choices were only acceptable if they matched your vision for my life. So I stopped asking you to understand my life. I just lived it. My father's hands were on his knees. He was looking at the tablecloth. I own a 2-bedroom condo 3 blocks from Lily's school. I paid it off last year. I have a retirement account and a college fund for her. And I have not needed anything from this family in 6 years. I was not saying this to brag. I want to be clear about that. I was saying it because I'd spent 6 years being treated like someone who needed saving, and I needed the record to be accurate. I didn't tell you any of this because it felt better to be invisible than to be reduced to a punchline about how I turned out okay despite everything. The silence was complete. Even the ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to have pulled back a few degrees. It was Nate who spoke. He'd been quiet, standing slightly separate from his family, and when he spoke, his voice was careful and straightforward. For what it's worth, my father talks about Mercy General Cardiac. He said the department there is doing things nobody else is doing yet. And he said the surgeon who handled his case was somebody who should be teaching at a medical school. She has been, James said, from across the table pleasantly. Northwestern, 2 semesters. Nate nodded once. He looked at Colin. He didn't say anything else to Colin, but whatever the look said, it said enough. My brother sat down on the edge of a chair near the wall. He looked the way people look when they have been carrying an image of someone in their head for so long that encountering the real person feels like vertigo. Natalie, he said, and his voice had changed. The performance register was gone. He sounded like he was 22, which is how old he was the last time I remember him being honest. Why didn't you just tell us? I told you things when I thought it mattered, I said. You told me I was making a mistake. You told me I was being unrealistic. You told me you actually said this. That being a single mother in your 20s is a one-way door. Remember that? I do. He remembered. I watched him remember. I stopped correcting your version of me because it was exhausting and it didn't change anything. You had decided who I was. I just went ahead and became someone else without you. Courtney made a sound that wasn't quite words. Then she said, "We were just worried about you." "No," I said simply. "You were worried about how I reflected on you. Those aren't the same thing." My father raised his eyes. He looked at me the way he used to look at me when I was small and had said something he wasn't sure how to respond to, when I was surprising to him, before I became a disappointment, before I became a disappointment, before I became a project, before I became a category. For a moment, he looked like a person who was genuinely encountering me and not his idea of me. "Natalie," he said, "I'm sorry." He said it the way people say the first true thing they've said in years, haltingly, like a man testing ice. "I think I've been sorry for a while." I didn't know how to say it. I looked at him. I didn't feel the rush I might have expected. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt something that was almost tenderness, and almost grief, and almost relief, all in the same breath. "I know, Dad," I said. "Happy birthday." He nodded. He looked at his hands. What happened after that was quieter than anything that came before. Colin and Courtney moved to their private dining room. Nate paused at the entrance and turned back briefly, not to me, but to James, and said something about reaching out to his father's medical team. James handed him a card. They shook hands. Before Courtney disappeared through the corridor door, she glanced back at me. The expression on her face was one I didn't have a clean name for. Not exactly shame. Not exactly shame. Not exactly respect. Something in between, still deciding what it wanted to be. I turned back to the table. James was refilling his water glass and Natalie was saying something about dessert, and the evening resumed itself the way evenings do when the complicated part has resolved. The drive home was quiet in the particular way of November in Chicago. The city lit and hushed at once, a thin snow trying to make up its mind. I picked up Lily from the babysitter's and she was mostly asleep, boneless against my shoulder as I carried her to the car. I buckled her in and she opened one eye. "Did you have fun?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep. "I did," I said. "Good." She closed her eye. "Me too." I drove home through the quiet streets and I thought about my mother. I thought about how she used to braid my hair before school and call me her serious one, not unkindly, just accurately. I thought about how she would have felt about tonight, whether she would have been proud or whether she would have been sad about the years of distance, or whether, as I sometimes believe, she already knew who I was going to become and had been waiting quietly for everyone else to catch up. At home I made tea I didn't drink and sat on the couch until the apartment settled into its late-night sounds. My phone had 7 texts, 2 from Colin. The first said, "Can we talk?" And the second said, "I mean it, Nat." One from my father, "It was good to see you, really see you. I'd like to have dinner, just the 2 of us if that's okay." One from a number I didn't recognize, which turned out to be Nate, who had gotten my number from James. My dad would really like to thank you in person sometime, and I'd like the chance to apologize for my family's role in the situation. No pressure. I read them all. I set the phone down. I wasn't ready to answer everything that night. Maybe not for a few days. Some things need to settle before they can be responded to honestly. And I have never seen the point of rushing a response just to prove I had feelings about it. My feelings were not in question. What mattered was what I chose to do with them. I reached over and picked up one of Lily's drawings from the coffee table, a horse, this one with wings, signed with a backwards L and a small star she'd added next to her name. I held it for a while. What I know about family is this. The people who watched you fail to become their version of you will sometimes, eventually, notice the person you became on your own terms. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes it's too late, or the gap is too wide, or the pride is too load-bearing. But sometimes, if you've done the quiet work, if you've built something real without an audience, if you've had the patience of someone who knows they're playing a long game, they look up, and what they see surprises them. That surprise is not your victory. It's just the natural consequence of living truthfully for long enough. I don't need my brother to understand the years I spent studying after Lily was asleep. I don't need my father to undo the words he said when I told him I was keeping her. I don't need Courtney's apology or Nate's gratitude or any version of events where I come out looking like I won something. What I have is a 4-year-old who draws winged horses and signs them with a backwards L. I have a career I built in the dark, without permission, without encouragement, one stubborn choice at a time. I have a condo with a window that faces east, which means Lily and I eat breakfast in the light every single morning. That is not a comeback story. It's just what it looks like when you stop waiting for people to see you and start becoming someone worth seeing. I still have that drawing on my fridge, the winged horse with the backwards L. I think about the years I spent being quiet. Not because I was ashamed, but because I had learned, slowly and at some cost, that the people who had already decided who I was weren't going to be changed by my words. They could only be changed by evidence. And evidence takes time. What happened at the Whitmore wasn't something I planned as revenge. I want to be honest about that. I made a reservation. I wore a dress. I had dinner with people I respect. Everything else was just the natural consequence of my father's family walking through a room where the truth happened to be sitting at a visible table. That's how it works, I think. Not dramatically. Not all at once. You make one right choice and then another, and after enough years, those choices become a life. And at some point, the life becomes undeniable, not to you, because you already knew it, but to the people who stopped looking. What carried me through those years wasn't certainty. I didn't always know it would work out. There were nights when Lily was sick and I had a 7 a.m. surgery, and I genuinely did not know how I was going to get through the next 48 hours. What I had instead of certainty was something quieter, a sense that the work itself was worth doing, regardless of who was watching. That Lily deserved a mother who didn't quit. That the patients on my table deserved a surgeon who showed up prepared. I kept going not because I believed it would eventually be recognized, but because I believed it was right. That's the thing nobody tells you about integrity. It doesn't feel heroic while you're doing it. It feels like getting up early and studying when you'd rather sleep. It feels like driving the modest car so nobody asks uncomfortable questions. It feels like saying, I work in surgery, when what you mean is, I operate on human hearts, and swallowing the gap between those two sentences because explaining it isn't worth the conversation it would start, and the intelligence it took. Not raw intelligence, but the kind you build deliberately, through failure and correction and staying curious when curiosity is inconvenient. That was never about proving anything to my father. It was about becoming someone my daughter could actually learn from. Someone who could sit across from her when she's older and say, I made hard choices, and I made them carefully, and here is what that looked like. My father texted me on a Thursday about 10 days after his birthday. He asked if I wanted to get breakfast. Just the two of us. I said yes. We went to a diner near his apartment on a Saturday morning. We ordered coffee and eggs, and we talked, haltingly at first, the way people talk when they're trying to cross a distance that wasn't built in a day. He asked about Lily. He asked what kind of surgery I do. He asked if I was happy. I told him the truth about all three. I don't know what my family becomes from here. I'm not holding a vision of Sunday dinners and group chats and everything healed. That's not how I think about it. What I know is that I did the work, I raised my daughter, I built something real, and I did it without anyone's permission. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to shrink into the story someone else wrote for you, and then, quietly, patiently, write your own.